Hey guys, sorry for the long wait. It's been a few weeks that we haven't posted. In reality, I had a few personal things going on, and today I'm back in force and strength. And we're gonna talk about something that has been on my mind for a while now. A lot of people are coming to me asking me, what should I buy as a first Cartier? And I always tell them, look, I think the Tank is maybe the choice. Why? We're gonna talk about it, and we're going to go a bit into details, a bit of history, and a bit of why you should choose that as a first watch and if it does work for you on your wrist. So let's dive in. Cartier Tank has been growing in popularity worldwide, and we were a bit behind in North America versus everywhere else, where, for example, Japan was really strong into buying Cartier years ago. They were buying them by the thousands from the US on a monthly basis. If you look online, you'll see and you'll find a few videos about dealers that were saying, hey, I was shipping maybe 100, 200 watches a month, within certain dealers, which was really interesting. And for a very long time, those watches were not worth a lot of money, and also they were very hard to find, especially like in Canada. Why? Because they were cherished by people for a very long time. You rarely find a Cartier that's rare or that's really desirable on the market because people normally keep them in their families. It's not your usual watch collector. It's normally people that have a lot of money that buy Cartier and they hold them for generations. I could also go into the Patek route this way, but I think Cartier has been very strong, and it does replicate that idea of holding a watch for the next generation. Cartier has been designed in 1917 based on a tank, and it has been really a classic from the time. They only created about 6 of them, I think, in 1918, and so on and so forth. They created over the past almost 100 years, or just over 100 years, multiple versions. Today we're going to talk about the classic tank, okay? I don't have any older ones right here. I don't have anything that goes pre, I believe, maybe 1980, but the idea is very classic right now, where maybe from the 1920s, the 30s, the 50s, it doesn't really matter. They still held the same shape, they still held the same really perfect iteration of what a classic square watch should be. And we're gonna dive right in here with the classic Tank Must. I believe this one should be normally maybe early 80s. What's special about this one is that it has a manual wound movement, and that's what's cool about Cartier. Pre-1980s, most of those, if not all of them, were manual wound. Therefore, you do have variations of movements, variations of cases. You have those that are made in France, those that are made in England, and then you have those that were made for the US market, especially for New York. You do have a lot of different variations there. Moving on to the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s, you're gonna have a lot more colors, a lot of different patterns and affordability levels, okay? So you're gonna have from the Mazda Cartier, which is more of the entry level, we're going to go into more details in a few minutes, to the Cartier CPCP, which was the Cartier Paris Collection Privée. What that means is that you're going to have some lower end pieces that are really affordable, that everyone or anyone with a bit of means is going to be able to afford at the moment. And then you have different sizes. You have 19, 23, and then you have some in the newer ones over 25 millimeters, which are really interesting. Therefore, you have affordability, you have variation, and then you also have something that's classic, that's gonna stay in your collection for a very long time. It's not something that people are just gonna be like, okay, I want to sell my Cartier down the road and get rid of it, okay, just because it's something that's so stable, that's so interesting on a long term. By the end of the video, we're also gonna talk about the alternatives of those watches, just because I do understand that certain people don't want to go the Cartier route. The Cartier Tank Must appeared in 1977 based on the fact that there was the Quartz crisis. And it's one of those watches that really transcended time and the effects of the Cartier sales from the 70s. A lot of people are asking me what the quartz crisis is the Japanese market has developed over the years a quartz movement, which was much more affordable, a lot better in terms of accuracy, and for a while it was quite a bit more expensive than the mechanical watches. Until then, it became a lot more affordable. It became something of more of a popular type of watch, and that created a very, very big problem for the Swiss industry, which was still very expensive even at the time compared to most of the market, including Breitling has closed its doors back in the late 70s, I think early 80s. A lot of companies were having a huge decline in their sales, and therefore Cartier has used that to actually go forward and apply that to their marketing strategy. Therefore, we have a lot of Cartier Must, which were the more affordable line of Cartier, or the entry level of Cartier, that were using the quartz movements. A lot of those even today have a lot of problems just because there's no more parts for them, and so on and so forth. Therefore, even here, I'll show you an example. This is a Mazda Cartier, which is really rare. It's new old stock. It dates back from the early 80s. It has, I could call it almost a tuxedo dial, where you have two colors, black and a very dark gray with golden writing everywhere. It's new old stock. It was never worn. This one was actually just sold to a good customer of mine. It still has the sticker, it has the box, the papers and everything. Problem with those, most of the time, what happens is that if they were left alone for 20, 30 years, the battery is going to leak. It becomes a problem. As you see right now, the battery is in. We put the battery, it's brand new. So you see that the hands have not moved from their 12 o'clock position. A lot of those have those problems after that many years, and movements have been more and more expensive to find and to source. I'm lucky enough to have someone that actually supplies me parts for those. It's not cheap. Obviously, those watches are increasingly rare right now to find in this condition, and they become, somewhat of a collectible item at the moment, and they have been increasing in value tremendously, okay? Such watches we find a few times a year, but it's not something that's very, very common. Therefore, when we get them, you also have to think that we have to service them. There is a guarantee of about 2 years. And when it comes to vintage watches, we have to do what needs to be done in order to satisfy the customer and yourselves, the ones who actually are really good customers of mine and who listen to the channel. So if you're looking to buy a vintage Cartier, you also have to think of a maintenance, plating, because the Mazda Cartier has been, for most cases, is a silver plated, it's actually a silver base case, and it's gold plated on top. And if you have been wearing that watch for a long time, or if the one you bought has been worn for a long time, you're going to see acidity went through, and also most of the time it's on those lugs that are really rounded off. Most of the time at the base of the lugs you're going to have a lot of loss of the gold. Therefore, you have to restore a case. Some of them have damaged dials, damaged movements, and you do need to be really careful on what you're buying. Are they easy to replate? Yes, they can be easily replatable. The job can be done. I've seen it done before. Is it worth it? Yes, in certain cases, if you have a good base that you're starting with and you know a proper guy who can dismantle the watch correctly and do it. So a must is interesting to the level of its quality, okay? If you want to go that route, there's many, many, many variants in terms of dials and in terms of bracelets, and you can tone it up, tone it down. It's a really cool watch. When it comes to today's marketing, they did use, as you see right here on my screen, they did come in 2022 with a limited series of different colors. So you had the blue, the green, the burgundy, and the black, I believe, and a few others if I'm not mistaken. But having seen those in the flesh, they're really nice. They did remove the Mazda Cartier on the dial, and it just makes it very, very clean in terms of wearability. When it comes to something a bit more rare, okay, or more high-end, we're going to be looking at the Cartier Tank Louis. So the Tank Louis is basically the higher end of the line. In this case, we still have a quartz movement. This one is the 81052, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, the 81052. This one is number 50 of the line. So it's one of the very, very early ones. This one does have box and papers. It's on the website at the moment. It's from 1985. And I think it's one day before it was purchased, one day before my actually my birthday. So it's pretty cool. It's not something you see every day, and it just tells you how Cartier just increasingly went for higher and higher end pieces, even though they were quartz. This is an original watch, except for the band that was made by Aaron Bespoke. Shout out to Aaron. He did a really good job in a really timely manner. So that's something that's increasingly rare. I get maybe 2-3 of those a year of different versions. The mechanical pieces are extremely expensive. There's different versions of them. You have the ultra thin or the regular ones. The regular ones are most probably going to be around the same thickness as the quartz ones, whereas the ultra thin are going to be just a tiny bit slimmer. They're perfect for every day. You're not going to feel them on the wrist, and they will be really a good companion for anything that you want to do in the city. It's not They're not going to be watches that you're going to be doing sports with, or that are going to be ultra resistant to your everyday, sports activities or anything like that. But on a daily basis, they're perfect. If you do have the choice, you have choices. If we're talking money, I want to discuss that a bit as well. You're gonna have choices starting maybe at $1,000 US. Again, you have to be really picky and really choose your battles there. If you see something, again, what I tell people is that don't buy something that's too cheap. Most probably it's too good to be true in most cases, and you're gonna go towards the $20,000-$30,000 or even higher if you have a platinum version, really rare unique piece, or something that's really almost unique on the market. If you're looking to buy, always buy from someone who's reputable. Do I consider myself reputable? I hope so. I'm working very hard to actually please my customers and also do a very good job, but the after sales, if anything happens, doesn't happen often, but we have to stand behind everything we do. And when it comes to those watches, again, they might be a bit finicky. They might have little problems from time to time just because they become older. Movements are also not of the best qualities. Back in the 60s, 70s, they did use some Le Coultre movements. I think the CPCP was using the Frédéric Piguet movements in certain cases, which were pretty good. But today, when we're talking of the lower end versions of them, obviously they need a lot of attention when it comes to servicing. Even if it's a quartz movement, you have to dismantle them, oil them, and so on and so forth, and then replace the coils or anything that might be needing replacing if that's the case. Does it change the value of the watch? Not at all, even though you actually upgrade the movement, because they do have upgrades from Cartier. And if you send out your movement that's not working, or your whole watch, to Cartier, they will upgrade it. I think it's going to be somewhere in the $1,200 to $1,500, I think, Canadian, so roughly around 1,000 US. It's absolutely worth it. One last thing, and it's very important. We talk about Cartier, but there's also a lot of different options. I'm just gonna go with something that's in the line of the CPCP or almost CPCP. I have here a Santos Dumont in solid gold. This one came from the original owner. It's unpolished. It does have the original burgundy strap, original gold-plated buckle. I didn't touch anything. I've been wearing this watch a few times lately, and that's also in the line of the higher end of the tanks. I never had a tank that was of this caliber. This I've had a few times, the Santos Dumont. Again, that's something that's really interesting in the line. Again, very early 1910s, 1915 design, so that's really cool. In terms of options, you do have a lot of, for example, you have an Omega right here. This one is still quite affordable, and we're talking of something that's manual, rather cheap versus the Cartier alternatives. And then you have an Omega movement, really easy to service. It's not going to be very expensive to service those, and even if it's highly damaged, you can find them online. You can have the whole movements replaced, no problem on these, and it's not going to affect the watch tremendously. Okay, if you're talking then something that also was very classic, and I would compare it in terms of desirability without having any of the let's say overhype around it, is the reversal. So it does have a certain similarity when we talk about Cartier Tank and we're talking about the reversal. They're, I'd say, one of the main competitors in the industry when we're talking about similar designs, and that's one of them that I really enjoy. The other thing that's really cool, that's really unique, this one is not ready yet. It's a watch that I've been posting on my Instagram lately. It's actually a doctor's or a Brancard Rolex 1490, and this one is pretty cool. It's one of the early ones. It's fully marked. It's solid white gold top and bottom, with the mid part of the case being rose gold. Also, the markings are there and everything else. Obviously, do have a lot of similar or similarities in those cases back from the designers of the 1910s, 1920s, 1930s, and rectangular watches were in big fashion back in the time. That's why the Cartier Tank is having a lot of popularity right now, because you have a lot of choices. If we're going to a Rolex like this, for example, not everyone has about $10,000 to put into something like this, especially if it's something clean. It's all original. This one, the only thing that I need to do is find the hands, as I said, but otherwise the watch is all proper. The movement is clean. It's just needing a service. It's the second service, I think, in 100 years that is gonna go under, or we're gonna go through, and that's pretty impressive for the time. Otherwise, you do have many other brands, including, I believe, Universal Geneve, that did a few similar tanks or of those square watches, and many other choices. It's all gonna come down to you again, as I say in most of my videos, what you like. But I think the Cartier is gonna be a very, very good contender for any collection and anyone that actually enjoys those watches. They have been for a very, very long time under huge veil, lack of knowledge or lack of interest from the perspective of collectors, but more and more people are coming down to the store and asking me, hey, do you have a Cartier Tank? Right now it just happens that I have 4 or 5 of them on hand, but most of the time they just sell almost instantaneously. So if you do want more information about anything that I have right here, so what's available is gonna be the must with the limoncello dial, the Cartier Tank Louis, the 8152, and I have a 2415 here with a box and papers. And same thing, I did have a custom made strap made by Combat Straps, which is really, really good, and it complements the dial perfectly. If you do have other questions, as usual, subscribe, comment about what you think about those watches, if it's something you like, if it's something that you consider buying in the future, and follow us for the next video. We're gonna do a lot more in the next few weeks. For everyone asking me what I'm wearing today, it's something of a collector's piece. I've had it for maybe a year and a half or something, and this is a Hoyer Carrera. It's in immaculate condition. It's something that I would never sell. The watch is quite rare because the dial is pristine, the case is unpolished. It's really good overall, and it's a very, very early 1963-64 dial, which doesn't bear the T for tritium on the dial. So those are the really early versions, and the history behind it is that it was given to Harman Gammon, which was the trainer of the Olympic team of Austria from 1964, and they actually won all the medals back in that year, and they were really, really a strong team. Therefore, it's something that has to do with the Austrian history of sports, and also something to do with, you know, the fact that it was a very, very prolific year and the Olympics of the time. Thank you very much, guys. See you next time. If you do have other questions, you know where to reach me. I'm always at the store answering questions and helping you out. Thank you, guys. Take care.